Hello, and welcome to the 21st episode of the English Sovereigns podcast series. In this episode, I shall be examining the reign of Harold Godwinson, who was the last of the Anglo-Saxon kings. That will probably be the only time you hear that piece of music, as the House of Godwin had only one reigning monarch, and this was King Harold himself. I thought some pulsating music might be quite good because this was quite an important reign, given the battle that happened right at the end of it, and indeed the battle that ended the reign was the Battle of Hastings, and that was a pretty big turning point in English history. So, Harold came to become king, allegedly Ed the Confessor nominated him as a sort of Lord Protector / successor upon coming in and out of consciousness on his deathbed, according to the Life of King Edward, which is the book I referred to about his canonization in the episode on Edward. However, when Edward died, the Witan might have just stayed true to this, and they proclaimed him the king and crowned him at Westminster Abbey on, pretty much the first couple of days of January after Edward's death. And this set the precedent, the crowning of Westminster Abbey, because since then I think most monarchs have been crowned at Westminster Abbey, so I guess Edward does have a legacy in that regard. As a man, he was half Anglo-Saxon, half Danish. His mother was Danish, father, the Earl Godwin, of course, was Anglo-Saxon. The Godwin family had been the Earls of Wessex, and after that, in the reign of King Edward especially, they had kind of managed to put their fingers in a lot of other pies around the country. So they were a very, very powerful family, and Harold was the heir to that when he became the Earl in 1053. As I mentioned, I think, in the last episode, he got captured in Normandy when he was sent over to go and talk with William about smoothing out his succession with him and promising William the crown once Edward died. He got captured by the Count of Poitiers, but William ordered the Count to let Harold go, and allegedly, according to the Bayeux Tapestry, they formed a kind of camaraderie, and Harold swore to William that he would let William have the throne seamlessly when Edward died. Obviously, history shows that didn't happen. In terms of the actual, seamlessly giving him the crown didn't happen. And with the Bayeux Tapestry, you do have to take it perhaps a little bit of a pinch of salt, because it would want to try and portray that William had a good claim, and that the literal person who usurped his crown had promised that he wouldn't usurp his crown. So it made Harold look like the villain, and William look like the sort of innocent man who'd been deprived of his birthright, or at least of a contract made between two individuals. Harold must have been fully aware of this, because when he acceded the throne, he knew that William was preparing an invasion force. So Harold stationed quite a large group of peasants and good military people on the Isle of Wight to make sure that if an invasion fleet did come along, there would be something to deal with it if Harold couldn't directly deal with it. But this, ironically, wasn't really used at the right time, because on the 8th of September he decided to disband the army, and then he was delivered the news that Harald Hardrada, who was the king of Norway, and I think he was a relative of King Canute, or was related to the House of Denmark, invaded in Yorkshire and got in league with Tostig, who was the Earl of Northumbria, and it was the brother of King Harold, who was annoyed at Harold for not supporting him over a taxation issue in King Edward's reign. Hardrada and Tostig ravaged bits of Yorkshire and defeated the Earls Edward and Morcar at the Battle of Fulford. So Harold amassed an army and forced marched within 4 days up to Yorkshire and defeated Harald Hardrada at the Battle of Stamford Bridge on the 25th of September, which was quite a remarkable thing. After 4 days of hard marching, and managed to beat a well-provisioned invasion force. That was quite impressive. Harold was a good military commander, broadly speaking. However, 2 days later, on September the 27th, William invaded finally at Pevensey because bad weather had prevented him. And obviously there was no stationary defensive force, which he had actually left equipped for 9 months until the 8th of September. So that was a sad fate for him. So he got the remainder of his army, which obviously had lost a bit of sort of manpower at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, forced them all the way back down to London, arriving there on the 6th of October. And then on the 14th of October, he finally took up a position on Senlac Hill, which is between the town of Hastings and the town of Battle, appropriately named. And at Senlac Hill formed a shield wall, which was the default sort of defensive military tactic for armies in this period, because it was quite effective. Meanwhile, William's army had the low ground and had to try to obviously attack upwards, which was quite hard. So they adopted the tactic of pretending to retreat. So some of his horsemen decided to pretend to retreat into the woods, and some ill-disciplined Anglo-Saxon troops, or some Anglo-Saxon troops looking for glory or whatever reason, went down, tried to chase after them, and were slaughtered. So eventually enough Anglo-Saxon troops were persuaded to go down, or were sort of, for whatever reason, were persuaded to go down to attack these retreating horsemen, only to be cut to pieces, which provided William with enough forces equal to Harold's, or enough at least energy and wherewithal to attack Harold's shield wall in an effective manner, which they did. And eventually this caused Harold to die. Harold could have died one or two ways, or indeed he could have died in both of these ways at the same time. So he got an arrow to the eye, according to the Bayeux Tapestry, and then also got cut down, I should say, by William and some other knights. I mean, both could have happened. So Harold died on the battlefield, and that was the last of the Anglo-Saxon kings. There is an alternative theory that he didn't actually die at the Battle of Hastings, and instead sort of quietly crept away, which I don't see how he would have done, and decided to go on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, as you do, come back via France, spend a bit of time chilling there, and then decide to live the rest of his life out as a hermit in Devon, only revealing on his deathbed that he was actually Harold Godwinson, the last Anglo-Saxon king of England. He was actually succeeded by Edgar Atheling, who I mentioned, I think, in Edward's podcast, who was the actual House of Wessex heir, as I think the grandson of King Edmund II Ironside. The Witan did proclaim him, but eventually they kind of deserted him. They thought it's not worth it. And I think William and Edgar did strike up some kind of bargain, but I think I'll go on to that in William's podcast explicitly. So Harold was dead, William was victorious and managed to secure the rest of the country. 1066 was a huge turning point for England, as I mentioned. Harold, to be fair to him, tried his best to try and make sure that the country was kept together and not invaded successfully. Obviously beating Harold Hardrada was quite a big feat, and then very nearly defeating William, because the Battle of Hastings did rage on for about 9 hours, so it was a long battle, and it could have really gone either way. Had the Anglo-Saxon troops not been as ill-disciplined as they were, they perhaps would have succeeded. Harold, I think, was quite willing to die for his troops, which is obviously quite an admirable trait, but he was killed. Such is the hand of fate. I'll obviously go on to the sort of next bunch of kings soon, because they are quite different from the Anglo-Saxon kings. But yeah, that is, I suppose, the end of the first of 3 parts of this whole series. There are 61 episodes in total. That was the 21st, so we're getting there slowly but steadily. Thank you very much. Goodbye.